Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of our podcast, Is Breakfast Included? What's going on, guys? Not much here. Y'all want to hang out? Let's go hang out. Today on the show, my guest is Erv Karwelis. I think I mispronounced his name. That's okay. We're friends. We do that. Everybody pronounces my last name Guerrera or Guerrero, even though there's no extra R or E or O in there. It's an ongoing thing. I've also been called Beanie instead of Bernie. So that was a lot of fun. Beanie Guerrero. Today on the show, like I said, Erv Karwelis is my guest. Now, Erv is the founder of Idol Records. He's got a ton of great artists on his label. We talked about how he got into the music business, working for XXX Records, Sony Records, Geffen, working for some huge artists who are huge now, but they were not huge at the time, and what led him to start his own record label and how he's about to celebrate his 30th anniversary for an indie label. That's pretty good. It was a lot of fun. He told some great stories, and he's somebody I really respect. I'd met him once before briefly, but he was kind of one of those figures, kind of like a Jeff Lyles. I was always intimidated to go reach out and talk to him or try and be his friend. And then when you meet him, you realize, dude, they're the coolest people ever. Anyway, it was a lot of fun. I spent the afternoon at his place, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Let's check it out. Yeah, so we got a good level.
All right,
man. Introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Erv Karwelis. I run a record label in Dallas, Texas called Idol Records.
And how long has Idol Records been around?
It's been a long time. Actually, April 20th of 2023 will be our 30th, the 30th anniversary of our debut release. So
and what was that?
It was a compilation album of Dallas, North Texas bands.
Uh-huh.
And I compiled a bunch of different bands, Hagfish, Brutal Juice, Baboon, and all the bands that were playing around Deep Ellum at the time.
Yeah.
And, got them all together, got them in the studio, and put out a compilation CD of that. That was the first thing I ever did. It was kind of a testing the waters and seeing how it would go.
Yeah, right on. Yeah. What did you do before Idol Records?
Yeah, actually, I was currently at that point and prior. I worked for the major label record. I've worked with several different major record labels over the years.
Uh-huh.
Spent over 10, 11 years in that world. And then prior to that, I worked record retail. I worked for Tower Records and worked for a couple of independent record labels as well. And so while I was doing that, I'd been transferred from Los Angeles to Dallas with Sony Music. And I was just kind of blown away by the local music scene in the North Texas area. You know, it was coming from LA even. It was, it just kind of surprised me how many great original bands were out there playing, original music. And there were definitely bands that had, been signed prior to that, Edie Brickell and New Bohemians and Reverend Horton Heat and Pantera, things like that. Yeah. So there was already some bands on the national level, and I kind of got into Deep Ellum and started going to shows every night. And
was this like mid-90s?
Yeah, that was early 90s. That was like 92, 93. Yeah. So
and you came down here as an A&R guy.
Yeah, I was actually an artist development manager for Sony, and they had a Southwest branch office here, and they kind of handled about a third of the country. And I came and we did all the marketing plans for all the releases on Sony, which was like the Columbia and Epic record labels. And I was in that time I was more in the alternative world. So we had this amazing roster of bands coming up at that time. Worked the first albums from Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains and Oasis and Fiona Apple, Jeff Buckley, just on and on and on. Amazing bands that blew up, to be some of the biggest bands in the world, And
I remember around that time I used to manage a Hastings Music.
Yeah.
Where I'm from in Corsicana.
Yeah.
And I used to always talk to a Sony rep named Deborah Roman.
Yeah.
You know Deborah?
Yeah, she was one of my reps.
Yeah, so Deborah was the person that would call me and see how the stuff was doing and send me the promo stuff.
Yep.
But somehow along our conversation, she found out I was a huge Black Sabbath and Ozzy fan.
Okay, yeah.
So when Ozzy released No More Tears and he went on
Right.
the No More tour,
Yeah.
she called me and she said, "Hey, I got tickets for you to see Ozzy."
Yeah.
And this was long before cell phones. So I met up with her and another guy named Mike something. Can't remember.
Right.
But anyways.
Was that Bronco Bowl maybe? Or
no, it was it was Blind Melon, Alice in Chains, and Ozzy at Starplex.
Okay, right, yeah.
She arranged it for me to go back and meet Ozzy, and
I
always remember that. I've got that picture of me and Ozzy, and Deborah's in the picture with me.
Yeah.
And everyone always says, like, "Who's that?" I was like, "That's the Sony rep that made it all happen for me."
Yeah, I had a wild night with Alice in Chains that night. Yeah, we actually did a Rolling Stone magazine interview with Alice in Chains that night, and we did it at the basement.
Okay, yeah. Lane was on crutches.
Yeah, he was. He'd broken his ankle, and I've got pictures here somewhere of it. And it was Sadistic Sunday, which is like bondage night at the basement metal bar.
I remember that.
So Lane was getting whipped and all kinds of crazy stuff, and he lit my car on fire by dropping a cigarette on the seat, and it was a wild night, one of many wild nights.
So arriving in Dallas, was there any bands immediately that caught your ear?
Let's see. I'm trying to think. Let's see. When I first moved here, I was already kind of familiar with. I had actually worked for an independent label called Triple X Records in Los Angeles prior to getting in with Sony, being hired by Sony, and they kind of turned me on to some bands like Rigor Mortis and actually Casey, the bass player of Rigor Mortis, is my neighbor. And so,
is he?
Yeah, and I knew them, and I knew Pantera and stuff like that. And but I mean, I guess. Right off the bat, Tripping Daisy was one of the first bands I think that kind of caught my attention, and then let's see here, Course of Empire. There was just Funland, Old 97s.
I remember my favorite band at the time was Vibralux.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're on my Christmas record I did. Yeah, and they were working with Last Beat Records already by the time I'd gotten here, but they're a great band. And when I did a Christmas compilation a few years later that they were on, and so they were great. I mean, it was just amazing. I mean, it was just Denton had a great scene going on, like Baboon and Brutal Juice, and I mean, just so many cool bands up there. And then Fort Worth even had a scene happening, and
the Toadies.
Toadies were kicking butt, and it was just nuts, And so I was in the artist development world. So I was on the road quite a bit. I toured quite a bit with the artists, and I did tour marketing also and stuff. So it was an amazing job because I was in my 20s and just traveling, being on Lollapalooza and just going on the road with all these young upstart bands and kind of watching them. Quite a few didn't, but quite a few exploded rapidly.
Did any of them not explode that you thought were going to?
Yeah, I mean there was quite a few. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, but I mean there was just plenty of them, and unfortunately the major labels were just signing. It was like real competitive in those days where major labels would actually sign bands just to keep another label from signing them. They just didn't want them to get them. And then they might not become a priority or for whatever reason But I mean, there were just a number,
hold them hostage.
A number of bands that just didn't. I just for whatever reason didn't get the resources and the support that others did. But I'm at the top of my head, I'm not thinking. But there's there's a number of them and a lot of great ones too. And there was bands that got signed. Well, I mean, there was a band called July Alley that I was a big fan of here, and they were on my first compilation. Yeah, they were on my first album. They were on my compilation, and they got signed to Columbia Records by Nick Terzo, who signed Alice in Chains. He was a major A&R guy. Yeah, and they kind of had that similar vibe.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah,
and then they changed their name. I don't know if they were still on.
Yeah, they changed the name to Flak Jacket. They were. Yeah, I think Columbia didn't like the name, and so they changed it to Flak Jacket. And sadly the record never even got released. That's definitely one that
they were one of my favorite bands to see live around that time.
Yeah, I mean they were packing clubs in this area, and I even did like a showcase in the Midwest at there used to be these regional Midwest mini South by Southwest type things, and they came up there and played a showcase up there for Idol Records, and and yeah, man, they made a great record. Matt Hyde produced it. It's done and just sitting in a vault, and I have a cassette copy of it, and unfortunately, yeah, these poor bands would get, the raw deal, and that happened to a lot of Dallas bands, I think.
Yeah, I was talking to Jeff Lyles.
Yeah,
and he told me when he was working the Cottonmouth, Texas stuff.
right.
And he went and stole his masters.
Right.
He goes, they would never know that they were gone. They were just holding them hostage,
That's the sad thing. There's and there'd been a few bands with Idol over the years that started working on deals and had similar problems. I had a Detroit band that got signed to Warner Brothers, and Seymour Stein signed him, a legendary, he's the president of Sire Records, and there was so much consolidation going on during that time. Like AOL, Time Warner owned Warner Brothers at that time, and they spun it off to like a British investment group at that time, and they fired, half the staff, and that was going on like crazy in the early 2000s, where
kind of the death.
Yeah, as Napster was kind of hitting and everything, some of those major labels started fizzling, and they got caught up in that. The record was done, and it just literally one day they were on the website, the Warner Brothers website, as an artist, and one day we noticed that they weren't on the web. They didn't even notify the band at first. They just removed them from the website, and next thing.
So I bet you saw that a lot.
That's happened a lot, and I know a lot of Dallas bands. I'm forgetting, but there was a Geffen, and I worked for Geffen Records briefly, and there was a label. I can't remember if it was Slowpoke or somebody, but they recorded an album for Geffen that never got released. Yeah, I think that was them.
I think Vibrolux recorded an album for Arista.
Yeah, there was. Yeah,
I could be wrong, but
it happened to a number of Dallas bands, and I think the Tomorrow People, maybe similar thing happened with Geffen, maybe. But yeah, these bands were getting snapped up, and then some didn't get the records put out at all.
Yeah, and it's crazy because around that time, it was a big deal to get signed to a major label.
Yeah, that was kind of the goal in the early days, prior to digital, download sites and things like that. When it was all physical, it was just so hard for independent labels to get good distribution. And over the years, we had several distributors go bankrupt on us, owing us money, and if you didn't have a lot of marketing dollars, they just weren't going to get your records in stores. And so the goal was just out of necessity to get records in the marketplace to try to get a buzz going on the indie label, and then maybe graduate them to a major label. Like Tripping Daisy was picked up by Island, and several, Hagfish got picked up by Polygram or London Records, I think it was. That was always kind of the big goal. And that was in those early days, that was the goal, to get them up to a major label, to hopefully.
So what made you want to start your own record label?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Chicago and moved. I was born in Rockford, Illinois, about an hour outside of Chicago, kind of a blue class industrial town. And my father was a musician, so I kind of had that in my background. And he died at a pretty early, when I was pretty young. Actually, on the road, or they were regionally playing, and the band was in a really bad 6-car accident that was caused by a drunk driver, and so he died when I was young. And I still have his guitar, and that I kind of always that was kind of always my connection to him, was the music aspect of what he did, and that I had his guitar, and I played in some bands at a young age. And then after high school, I went to a 2-year community college in Rockford, and got like a degree in business there, an associate's degree. And then I had a roommate. We were just kind of sitting around wondering what to do, because there was kind of the town we were in is just kind of a dead end town. There was nothing going on there, or moving into Chicago or something like that. And we just took the crazy gamble of moving to Los Angeles. And I just, with no connections, no experience, I always kind of wanted to get into the music business in some aspect, and I decided that I wanted to be in the record industry.
Yeah.
And just started kind of knocking on doors, naive, of course every single one of them was sending me rejection letter. I had no experience, no connections. I got in with Tower Records in LA and started getting in there and working minimum wage in a record store. And the cool thing was meeting all the
one there on Sunset.
Yeah. And so I'm meeting, musicians, meeting executives and stuff like that. And I just started meeting people and knocking on more doors. I got in with a little label, Triple X Records. Started learning a lot. They had an amazing roster. They had the first Jane's Addiction record. They had, Social Distortion and all the Orange County, LA punk bands like the Adolescents and Angry Samoans, just so many cool bands, TSOL, Christian Death, tons of goth and punk and stuff like that. And then I started taking music. They had UCLA had a 2-year music business program, and I started taking classes doing that. And I ended up getting a job as a college rep for Sony, and got my foot in the door with them. And it was a college rep where I was kind of working college radio and doing college campus promotions, but all throughout the area and stuff like that. And so just
kind of worked your way up.
Yeah, just kind of got in, paying a lot of dues. Yeah, I did a couple of internships at some other small independent labels also, just learning anything I could, and sacrificing and working hard round the clock. And it seemed to kind of start working in my favor to where all these people that I could never, get the time of day from were all of a sudden realizing who I was. And I actually became a buyer for Tower. So I was the one, buying in inventory and stuff like that, and getting wined and dined a bit by the record labels and getting invited to all their parties. And, and so, building those relationships slowly and finally,
it's hard to explain the music business to people who aren't in the music business, but all aspects of it are 24 hours a day.
It is. Yeah. I mean,
even like you said, even a buyer
for,
the non-existent record store now.
Right. Right. Yeah.
You're constantly hustling.
Yeah.
And, like I said, all aspects of the music business, I think, are just, you can't have personal lives. You can't make plans. You can't do anything,
It was funny because, we had, we were dirt poor. One of my roommates also worked at Tower with me. And we had, I guess at one point, 4 people living in a 1-bedroom apartment, just starving. And you'd go to these parties just to get free food, It was tough, Everybody.
A buddy of mine was in a band in the 80s, and he said, we were being courted by all the A&R guys, but we would just go just to eat.
Get the free dinner,
just because they wouldn't take you to a cheap place. We'd all leave with food.
Yeah, I mean, but I'm so happy. I mean, it was a huge gamble. I didn't know anybody out there, and neither did my roommate, and everybody that we knew thought we were insane for just dropping everything and selling all our stuff and driving to LA and starting a new life without any connections. But I'd always kind of wanted to be in the music business, and I kind of decided that was, I was a musician in high school and stuff, and I just didn't have what it took to pursue a career as a musician, and I did like the business side of things. And
it's I think I would say admirable, because I'm the same way. I always thought I didn't have what it took to be on stage, but I wanted to be part of the machine.
Right.
And then I see people that are very much like me, but they're still kicking. You got to respect them.
But
I was very much like you. I knew I wasn't going to be in a famous band.
Right.
I knew I wasn't going to be the guy, writing the songs. So I chose a different path. And unfortunately, it happened later in life, but I made my way into the business.
I mean, it's really, you got to really stick to it. And I mean, you got to be pretty focused on it. You've got to be pretty committed. I mean, when I was out there, I was taking classes at UCLA. I was working at a record store. I was working at a label, all simultaneously. I was
no time for band.
I mean, we were all crammed into a 1-bedroom apartment, but I was just there like 6 nights 6 hours a night to go to sleep, basically. And the rest of the time I was gone doing stuff and working and meeting people and just grinding it. I was like, I'm going to take every opportunity I can out here to do this. Yeah.
You have to, you know,
And, yeah.
When I first started in this business, I got in the habit of not saying no
Right.
to anything.
Yeah.
Hey, can you fly here and do this show? A one-off. Yeah, I can do it.
Yeah.
Can you do that? Yeah, I can do it. And then, you know, like you said, pretty soon people started to recognize my name. And,
yeah.
And he'll come out and work. You know?
Right.
What happened later is I had to learn how to negotiate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Early on, you're doing everything for free or low dollar. You know, you're scraping by, and
I'll do it for the per diem.
After a certain point, you want to start making a living.
So, Idol Records started with a compilation.
Yep.
And how did that compilation do?
Yeah. I mean, so I was working at Sony when I started getting the urge to do that. I was doing artist development, but in Deep Ellum all the time. And a lot of our bands were playing Deep Ellum Live and Trees and the venues in Deep Ellum. You know, Soul Asylum and Alice in Chains. All these bands were coming through on their first tours. Pearl Jam playing Trees, you know, and you know, just real grassroots marketing. And we'd have local openers, or I was meeting the local bands and A&R was also the angle. I was doing the marketing and promotion for the developing artists, which was hand in hand with the A&R people, and that was kind of my goal, was more to get into that side of the thing and the business. And I started meeting these guys, and it just kind of dawned on me that I'd maybe like to start putting out some 7-inch singles or do a compilation or whatever. And I just started just talking to bands casually, saying, "Hey, I might do some singles, or I might do a compilation. Would you be interested in doing a track?" And they all started saying, "Oh, that'd be great. It'd be cool." And it took it probably took about a year to get it all together, get everybody in the studio to record something, and there was a few that were hopefully going to do it and didn't get. It got to a point where I had to finally get this thing out, because I think it was probably a year from the time I started putting that word out to getting, I can't remember if it was like 12, 13 songs, different artists.
Yeah.
And, we put it out. It did okay. It did pretty good. We did a couple of big release shows in Deep Ellum and I think we only pressed like 1,000 CDs, but we blew those out. Yeah, the bands got, each band got, a couple of boxes of CDs for being on it, and we got some great press locally, and it was funny. Z-Rock was still based in Dallas at that time, and they had us in and did it. They played the entire album on Z-Rock, and all the like the local shows were popping up. Like the Eagle had a local show, and the Edge had a local show, and they all kind of helped us promote it and had some of the bands play. And so it was just amazing that the support, and maybe within a year, at least like 3 of those bands got signed to major labels. Hagfish got signed to Polygram, London Polygram, and Brutal Juice got signed to Interscope. Baboon got signed to Wind Up Records, which is kind of a subsidiary of a big indie label. And then, Tim DeLauder from Tripping Daisy was on it. He did a song with a band called Hash Palace. So
I remember Hash
Tripping
Palace.
Daisy were kind of.
So any of these bands that you approached, they weren't like you just approached them about being on this possible compilation.
Yeah,
they weren't like they weren't like held to the fire. Like you have to commit to Idol Records. This is
it was just a one-off thing. Real low key. Because I didn't know if there was going to be a second record, and in those days I was putting in 80-hour weeks with Sony, traveling all over the place, and. So it was kind of an experiment. But it was just real low key, one song thing.
So it did well enough to do something else.
It did. Yeah. We, amazingly it did pretty well. And then the second project I did was, I did a split release with Old 97s and Funland. And Funland had actually already been on Arista Records. They had a major label deal. And then I guess that came to an end. They just did the one album from them, and then severed their ties with them, and they were on the they were able to do something, and that just kind of happened. And Old 97s were kind of an up and coming band locally, and it turned out that Clark, the guitar player for Funland, lived with Rhett Miller from Old 97s, and I was talking to them both like individually about doing a single or something. I wanted to start doing like 7-inch singles, and this is actually a time when vinyl wasn't really very popular, but I've always been a vinyl collector, and and so we started talking about doing 7-inch singles. But then Clark and Rhett had this idea they're like, why don't we do a that was kind of becoming a thing. I know Sub Pop had done a few split singles where and the each band did an original song, and then they covered the other band's song. And old 97s are more rootsy Americana leaning, and Funland were more pop rock leaning. So they kind of put a different spin on each other's songs. And so that was the second release. And we started recording those songs, and it was I got a little wrench thrown into things where I got actually moved to Chicago by Sony to the Chicago office right around the time that was coming together. And actually we recorded the old 97s in Chicago, and then actually subsequently they became pretty huge in Chicago. They started playing shows up there. But yeah, we got that out, and that was the second release on Idol, and both those bands have done pretty well. 97s are still doing great. And the members of Funland, Clark joined the Toadies. Will Johnson started Centromatic, and so they all kind of went on to bigger things.
Brett Miller hasn't aged a bit.
I know. I mean, it's amazing. They're still. It's I think they're celebrating their 30th anniversary this month. Maybe it is. So it's
their climb was really slow and steady.
It was
underground. They had all these celebrity fans.
Right. Yeah. They're
Janine Garofalo loved them.
Right. Yeah, they've had some major, it's funny because I'll even be talking to people in Dallas who still don't know who they are, which blows my mind because they've been in movies, they've been on every late night show there is. They sell out shows in Dallas constantly, and they're under the radar enough that there's people here in their own hometown that still don't even know them. Amazingly, but they have a diehard fan base, and it's hard earned, from all that road work and touring, and
that's the kind of following you want.
Exactly, it is, man. I mean, instead of having that big hit and then going into obscurity or whatever, and
that's all you're remembered by. They don't even remember the band; they just remember the song.
And I've worked with some bands that have had that too, and I mean, these guys still tour and pack 1,000+ venues everywhere in the country, and they're on the road right now. So he's been supportive of the band. They have taken a bunch of Idol bands on tour over the years, like early on the Death Ray Davies, and I mean, they've just in the past year done shows with Motorcade, and so that's always been cool. Vanessa Peters has done dates with them, I think, and it's cool that they've supported a lot of Dallas bands, which is really cool of them, and I've always encouraged my bands to help promote shows, and sometimes each other's shows, and play together, and there's more synergy that way, and it helps everything out. And
this may be a silly question. What was the first band you signed to Idol that actually you saw a return?
Right.
What's the first really successful band you signed to?
The second one would probably be it. Yeah, I mean, and it's funny, we did that on a 10-inch vinyl release, in an era where nobody was buying vinyl, and it was a weird format, like a 10-inch. We did it as like the way we did it made it probably the highest chance of not succeeding. Like hardly anybody. That was in '93 when that came out, and everybody was like, we were literally getting mocked for putting it on vinyl like that. I think the Observer was mocking, why would anybody put this on vinyl, and then a 10-inch vinyl, and then it's a two artist record, which it was so weird all the way around. But that sold out. We did 1,000 copies. It blew out quick, and then we reissued it on CD, and then to this day it's still streaming and pretty good numbers. And that was, even though that was just a 4-song EP, which also makes it harder to make money on, and it did actually do okay, and still is pretty popular after all these years.
Still sells, you still move a few copies.
And so, and then yeah, then I started kind of moving into like a bunch of punk bands, and I had, pretty good success with a lot of those. And but yeah, I mean, it's a struggle because I mean, early on there was pretty high recording budgets back before home studios came along and stuff like that, and I was gambling some real money on some of these bands that had never put out a record before, had no track record.
Were they mainly DFW based bands, or were they from all over?
A little bit, yeah. A lot of them were. There was, after about a year and a half in Chicago, a little less than 2 years, Sony relocated me back to Dallas again, which was great. And there was a band I'd met in Chicago. They were from the UK called Billy Club, actually. Kurt, who was also in that band, Mitra, was their singer. But the rest of the band were British. And they had moved to the Chicago, Wisconsin area. Some of them were in the Chicago area and somewhere in Chicago. And I met them there, and the guitar player was in the UK Subs, and I'm sorry, he was in the Exploited. The drummer was in the UK Subs, and I kind of grew up loving that kind of punk scene, and met those guys, and so they were kind of at that point based in that Chicago, Wisconsin area, but they actually relocated to Dallas when I moved back, just to I'd signed a deal with them, and we were working on an album. They recorded up there in Chicago, and they ended up moving to Dallas. And some of them are still here, actually. And then there was a band, Purvis, local female fronted band. I'd signed them.
One of my favorite local bands.
Yeah. So that was early on, and
where I met the legend, Eric Schmidt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And but yeah, they were mostly, with the exception of Billy Club, who did relocate here, kind of in this general area. This is kind of what I knew. But I did end up getting, bands from around the country. I actually signed a band that had been on Sony called Watershed. They were from Columbus, Ohio. I signed a band called Gunfighter. They were out of San Diego. They were originally from Kansas City, but out of San Diego. And I kind of got into the Detroit scene. My family, my parents moved to Detroit after I kind of graduated from high school. And so I'd go visit them quite a bit. But there was a band called Sponge that I worked with at Sony. And their drummer left the band, and he was in a Detroit punk band that I did a 7-inch with. And then he launched a band called the Fags that did really well, a power pop band.
Yeah, I remember that.
And that was actually the band that signed to Warner Brothers, recorded the album, and ended up getting dropped because the company was sold and all that stuff, and the staff was gone that signed, that kind of were working their project. They actually gave, one good thing about that deal was that Warner Brothers actually gave us that record, so it got released on Idol eventually. But yeah, and then
a couple of those songs got a lot of radio play.
Yeah, even in Dallas, they were at heavy rotation. That band blew up. I mean, they were selling a lot of records.
I remember that.
Tons of records. And they were on the Warped Tour, on the main stage. And I mean, we were FedExing like hundreds of records every 2 days to them on the road, because they were selling records so quickly that, I mean, we couldn't press them fast enough. It was crazy. It was like out of control how many records and CDs they were selling. So that it was big, and
how would you approach a band because everyone focused on the major labels when I was, but how did you approach a band? What did you say, hey, I'll finance your record, and then like it's a split, or I can't promise you the big signing bonus, but I can finance your record and we can put it out. We can get you distributing, and
that was it. Yeah, I mean, and especially in the early days, I was funding all the recordings and everything, and when I was still working for like the first 6 or 7 years of running Idol, I was still working full time at Sony, making okay money, and I had the resources to kind of fund, and made a lot of mistakes, spending way too much money in some cases. But I was doing that. And, but yeah, the deals have always been real artist friendly, real, 1-off, 2-off deals, 50-50 profit split typically. And
is it 50-50 after you recoup?
yeah, we recoup everything 50-50 and split any profits 50-50. Whereas you sign to a major label, 100% of your budget's anything they're spending on you is gonna be recouped solely out of the artist's minuscule royalty, like a 10% royalty. So when you're on a deal like that, that's a rough thing when they're recouping all the money only out of the artist side. But so we recoup everything 50-50 and then split any profits 50-50. And it's kind of like what all the so-called, cool artist friendly labels. I was always kind of like everybody influenced by like Discord Records or, some of the punk labels. And
did you ever have in the back of your mind, like this could be a band that a major label will start bidding on? You give them that option, like, hey, if a major label wants you, we'll work that deal.
Yeah, that was always, especially in those early days when that was kind of the goal. And honestly, I was always hoping, that Sony would pick up some of these artists. The company I actually worked for, I had their blessing to run the label. And I mean, it was crazy that I was literally putting in like 80-hour weeks from the entire duration of the time I worked there, probably, and traveling extensively and no home life. Basically, it was all work, which I loved. I didn't mind. But then I still was crazy enough to want to take on more, start a record label on top of doing that. I already had the goal of,
you're doing artist development.
I was working with the biggest. I'm working with, Ozzy and Aerosmith and Rage Against the Machine and Pearl Jam and, Alice in Chains and Pink Floyd. I'm working with the biggest, the rock stars that I grew up worshiping. Like it was the most insane life I could have imagined. People that I used to camp out for concert tickets for, I'm actually traveling on the road with now and working with them, and Judas Priest and
I'll ask you this: you just mentioned them, Rage Against the Machine. When I was, like I said, when I worked at Hastings, I used to work with a record label out of Northern California, Shrapnel Records.
Right.
They mainly dealt in the shredding guitar.
Yeah.
But their guy, Tim Aleos. Do you know Tim?
I'm not sure. From the label, or was he with the label?
He was with the label.
Okay, I don't know if I knew him.
He's the guy I talked to about order. I would order the tapes.
Yeah.
And we were talking on the phone one day, and he said, "Hey, there's going to be this band. You should really check them out, and stock up. It's going to hit like nothing." He goes, "You've never heard anything like this."
Right.
And he was talking about Rage and how he sold it. He's like, the drummer used to be in a band with the singer from Pearl Jam. He goes, but they have this guitar player that makes all these crazy noises with his guitar.
Right.
He goes, it sounds like computers and DJs. And he goes, but he's doing it all with his guitar.
Yeah.
So when you worked with him, did you realize what you were watching?
Man, a little bit. It was weird. Like Sony introduced us to them at a convention. We would have these conventions usually every year in like Miami, or they'd be in exotic places, Hawaii, Miami, Puerto Rico, Toronto. I think that year it was in Miami, and nobody had heard anything from them. And we would take over these big resorts with thousands of Sony employees, and it was the big rah-rah kind of thing, giving out performance awards and stuff, but showcasing new music and getting people pumped up about it. And they basically just brought them. During a normal day, it could be like Bruce Springsteen performing, Mariah Carey performing, the biggest superstars in the world on a hotel, banquet hall stage, and they brought in major production for all that stuff. And I think Harry Connick Jr. and Rage played the same day. And so it could be like this crazy lineup of bands, but they just put them on at a certain point, introducing them, and they just lit up for like 20 minutes in a hotel ballroom, and it just blew everybody's minds, because that was our first exposure to them, was at a convention. And Michael Goldstone had signed them, who signed Pearl Jam and quite a few other major bands. They just blew my mind, basically, to see them in full force, like at I don't even remember. It was like noon or something in a hotel banquet room.
Yeah, I think I saw them for the first time at the old Deep Ellum Live.
Yeah.
And they were the opening band for House of Pain.
Right. That was their first show on their first tour. It kicked off in Dallas.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
Wool was the opening band, and then
the
Baby Band, and then I remember they were at their own merch booth.
Yeah.
And they were telling everybody, we're going to be on Lollapalooza this summer.
Yeah.
And I still got a sticker they gave me that. I was that kid, man. I was that kid that saved everything.
Yeah,
I still have this sticker they gave me.
Yeah, they were cool. I mean, it was because they were here in Dallas for a few nights before that, and Tom actually contacted me at the office, the guitar player, and Tom Morello, and he's like, "Hey," and it was funny because I'd never really had a band do that before. I was in the office, and he called, and he's like, "Man, I really want to go see the JFK museum and kind of check that out. Would you be able to take me to that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's cool." And at that time, I'd never even been to it myself, and I mean, yeah, he's an incredibly intelligent guy. He knows his history. I mean, he's a Harvard graduate,
Yeah.
but it was funny. He grew up pretty close to where I grew up. He's from Libertyville, Illinois. We both grew up in the far northwest suburbs of Chicago. And so we kind of clicked right off the bat. And then I just had this blast hanging out with him doing that. And, we ended up becoming,
At the time, did you guys know that they were going to make this huge political footprint that
I mean, we really honestly had no indication of how they were gonna do, but I mean, there was definitely a buzz brewing, and but then it was the very first night of their very first tour for the very first album, and although they'd played LA and stuff like that, I saw them at the convention and I knew they were powerful, and I was
there. I was right up front. That's the only reason we went.
That's just funny because that was like one of the only bands that I worked with at the major label world that I was in the pit,
Yeah.
So I was right in there with everybody else. And I mean, it caught on fire quick, and I mean, it
didn't take long for that,
Their live shows are just second to none pretty much, and to this day, this tour they did, I didn't get to see them. I think El Paso might be coming up. I think that's going to be the only date in the U.S.
Next leg.
So
I saw two of the shows. My friend Lisa, who does this podcast with me, we went to two of the shows in New York. We saw two of the Garden shows.
Right.
I had tickets to see the Evil Empire tour.
Yeah.
And I got a kidney stone. I couldn't go see it, so I sold a ticket to a friend of mine.
Yeah.
And then I had tickets to see them with Beastie Boys. And of course that tour went away.
Right.
But I did see him open for U2 at the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah, the Cotton Bowl. I was there. And, it was crazy.
Yeah, so I'd seen them the very few times they were in Dallas, but missed a couple of shows.
Right. I mean, that was like within a few years' time. They're going from Deep Ellum Live to the Cotton Bowl, and doing this world tour with U2, and then they were playing all the biggest festivals in Europe, Reading Festival, and all that stuff, and just seeing the video of those shows where there's like 80 or 100,000 people bouncing up and down. It's just crazy how they fire people up, and it was fun. When I lived in Chicago with Sony for a couple of years, Tom would come home on the holidays and he would have these amazing jam sessions in his mom's basement that he invited me to, and major people, he went to high school with the guitar player for Tool. He's also from Libertyville, and
they were in a band together.
They were early on. They were.
I've read this interview where Adam's like, Adam said like Tom was the worst guitar player. Nobody wanted to play with him.
And like James Eha from the Smashing Pumpkins, and I remember like Maureen Herman from Babes in Toyland. There was all these rock stars that live in the Chicago area, kind of down there, and of course a bunch of other friends, and his mom's hanging out, she's awesome. I think she just turned 99 last week, Mary, and she's famous for her introductions of the band and stuff. So it's funny. Tom still got all his Kiss posters up in his mom's basement, and we're down there jamming and drinking beer and having a blast. And but they were just phenomenal. I mean, the way that they exploded, and I'm glad that they're back kind of doing it again. So
you kind of feel cool, like being part of that.
Small
part, but
it's pretty, I mean, cause you're right in the trenches with them in those early days. And some of them, some of these bands quickly forget you, you know.
They do, yeah.
But
they
he's
do.
the kind of he was the kind of guy that always, remembered and was, the kind of guy that would invite you to his mom's house, So like, yeah.
You're coming up on 30 years of
Yeah.
Idol Records, and you're signing younger bands, and,
Yeah.
and they're, I spoke to Dahlia Knowles,
Yeah.
Laura Kay. What do you look for in a band?
Yeah, I mean, I ultimately look the songs are the first thing, and if their live performance is good, and I hope that they have a good work ethic, which is not easy to find, unfortunately, because a lot of musicians are just kind of happy to be a local band and have some
Big
success.
fish in a small
Yeah,
pond.
I mean, I've had plenty of bands like that, and that's okay too, I guess. But like, it's not easy getting on the road, and especially when you're a young upstart band, when you're going to go play, a couple hundred miles away to like 12 people, and sleep on a floor, and it's hard, and it seems like less and less bands are willing to do that in this day and age. That used to be the only thing. Now you got social media, and I think some bands are more content to just
live streaming.
Yeah, they'll just play locally and do internet type stuff.
Yeah, that used to be the goal. Get in a van and just sleep on living room floors and play for gas money. And
it's hard. Yeah, I mean, it's not for everyone, but I mean,
it's my son when he was growing up. I did that for a long time.
Yeah,
with the van playing, and my son used to ask me, he's like, "What was the scariest thing that you ever did when you would play when you were touring in a van?" I'd be like, not having the gas money to get to the next place.
Yeah.
And he's like, "What was the best thing?" And I'm like, not having the gas money to get to the next place. Like that experience, there's nothing like it, man.
I know it. Yeah,
I mean, like it. And I see bands like Laura Kay, and I know Rose Garden isn't one of your bands, but bands like that that's their goal.
Yeah, they're working hard.
Road dogs.
Laura Kay are touring their butts off. I mean, it's a big difference because I get bands that'll get opportunities presented to them to go out on the road, and even Old 97s, for example, will say, "Hey, would you guys like to go out for 12 dates?" And I've had bands just say, "Nah, we can't." Somebody's got a day job, somebody's got kids that are more important.
How frustrating is that to you that you going into a partnership like this, like being signed to, like, that's an agreement. Like, I'm going to do my part.
Yeah.
And you do your part.
Right. Yeah. It hurts because, every single time somebody asks me, like, what can you do to get ahead? I always just say tour and play shows, because nothing does more for you than doing that. I mean, connecting with people in person. And you might go play Oklahoma City and play to 15 people, and maybe one might like you and buy the record at the end of the night. But there's really, in this day and age, getting a record reviews are almost a thing of the past, because you can just go on Spotify and listen to anything for free if you want to know what it sounds like. You don't got to read a magazine review to figure out what something sounds like. Now you just listen to it, and unfortunately, most people never do buy the record. That's how they listen to the music, is streaming. Press doesn't really do that much. Radio is getting harder and harder to come by. Dallas just lost its last rock station this week.
I know.
So, luckily we still have KXT. We're really supportive of independent local artists, thank God. But unfortunately, even radio doesn't have the kind of impact it used to have, where, like back in the day, we've had a number of artists go into like regular rotation on the Edge, which is a real powerful station. And we saw significant sales happen because of that. It was amazing, and attendance at shows. But for some reason now that doesn't seem to translate anymore. It doesn't seem to spike. You don't really see a spike in sales. You don't see much of anything.
Instagram numbers, social media numbers. That's what really people look for.
Even
doing this, me doing this, like, I'm like, well, how many people are following?
Right.
How many people have subscribed?
It's hard to get anybody's attention now. There's just too much going on, too much out there. And one good thing is it's gotten a lot easier to put music out into the world. You can record it in your bedroom and load it up on Spotify, and it's there, but I mean, you look at, I mean, I can't even remember what the numbers are. There's millions of songs on Spotify that have never even been played like once. I've read that not too long ago, and you know, the music's there, but nobody cares. Nobody knows about it. Nobody's listening to it. So yeah, the biggest, most beneficial thing a band can do right now, in my opinion, is to play live anytime, any place. And if a band just can't do that because they're just too committed to their job, if they have a family that they just aren't going to be able to do it, it's a guarantee that they're probably not going to have a lot of success in you know, the record release, you know, if they're not able to perform their music live and kind of connect. And if you're trying to sell physical records or CDs, that's where a lot of those sales take place at now. And
at the show,
there's less and less record stores out there these days, and their budgets, you know, they're carrying the hits and the 5,000 color reissues of every hit record ever made that people buy as investments, basically. And trying to get a band's debut album sitting next to, you know, whatever the
on transparent vinyl,
glow in the dark vinyl or something, or the $150 deluxe reissue of, you know, any album ever made now. It seems like
being a record label owner, it's easier to make records now. Like you said, everyone's got a home studio in their laptop. What do you prefer? Do you prefer that, or do you prefer like like being an audio guy? You know, being somebody who do you like the sound of real amps, real drums?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I do. And it's amazing. A lot of these artists are, you know, like Lorelei K, and, you know, Mike, who's in the band. He's got an amazing little home studio up in Denton, and he does amazing work. He's done all the Rose Garden records and Lorelei K, and I mean,
it's funny. I talked to him. All the local bands that I really like, he's the linchpin. Of all of them. They all go to him.
Right.
And he's got this thing about it, and it's very special.
Yeah, and I mean, and a good number of my bands do have home studios. A couple of the guys in Motorcade have pretty nice setups and semi-professional setups in their homes, or in smaller studio spaces and stuff like that. So it's, I mean, the big studios are amazing, but it's pretty incredible what these guys are doing in these smaller studios with real drums, real guitars, and you know, that way you're not starting yourself out $10,000 in the hole, booking a studio, you know, to record it in, and then almost be at this point guaranteed to probably not break even, you know, on the project, which kind of isn't ever good for the band to kind of
go in. It's like a college loan.
It's you know, and so
you don't have to answer this question. It's a lot cheaper now to put out a record compared to what it used to be. How quick do you see a return now?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. It can be pretty quick depending. The big expense now is that most bands want to put stuff on vinyl, and that is expensive, and it's exploded out of control in the past couple of years. I don't know. I guess supply chain problems, I'm sure, keeping people on staff. But all the record pressing plants have just increased their pricing, in my opinion, a lot more than they probably needed to. But it's gotten incredibly expensive pressing vinyl now. And it's almost like a break-even situation for us now. We don't even really see a significant profit when we're selling it at wholesale. We're almost selling the records at cost at this point. They're so expensive to manufacture. So if you press 500 to 1,000 records, you're, you know, in the thousands of dollars. And adding to the fact that the turnarounds are incredibly long now, you're almost waiting like a year to.
So it's imperative for the band to tour.
Yeah. So if we're pressing vinyl, it's pretty important. And, you know, now we're trying to, you know, recoup a $5,000, you know, manufacturing bill or $10,000 manufacturing bill, depending on how many we press, and that gets expensive. And then, you know, we'll hire on certain occasions, radio promotion, or we'll hire outside PR people for tours and promoting the records. And so you're racking up still a good amount of money and expenses on a new record, and some of the production costs and getting the artwork laid out, and it one thing after another. So you can still, even now that the budgets for the studio are not what they were once.
There's other stuff that'll put you in debt.
I mean, CDs were a lot cheaper to produce back in the day. So, you could press 1,000 CDs pretty reasonably, and now to press 500 records is like 5 times that amount.
Wow.
And then they're fragile. If they get damaged, nobody wants to buy them. And but I mean, we
these damn hipsters.
And I mean, we've actually had bands that didn't want. Some of these bands that aren't full-time musicians but they had a great record, and we've done some that were just digital only, where they were making money pretty much day one. We didn't have a lot of expenses, pressing physical formats and doing a bunch of PR.
Do you still enjoy it?
Yeah, I mean, it's still,
I'm looking around
as you can see,
your office is amazing.
I mean, it's funny when people ask me what I do for fun. It's like, this is what I do. This is my fun. This is my life. I'm a music junkie, probably to a fault, but
those original Appetite for Destruction cassettes.
I've got all the original vinyl pressings of the alternate covers and stuff, and so when I'm traveling, I'm hitting record stores, and I'm on eBay every night looking for stuff, and I go to record stores daily pretty much just for the label, and I'm half the time buying more records than I'm selling, but yeah, I mean, I love I go to concerts every chance I get. I go to live shows and clubs every chance I get. And if I'm on vacation, it's typically music related, it's going to South by Southwest or going to Midem in France, or, I've been fortunate. I've toured the entire world pretty much because of this label. And, I've been on the road with artists in Europe, and I actually have artists that live all over the world to this day. And, but yeah, music's my thing. I'm not,
hey, like I said, if you still enjoy it, you still enjoy it.
Yeah. So, I mean,
people who've been doing this something for 30 years and they hate it.
A smarter person might have quit doing this a few years ago, because it's it's a lot harder, as most people know. I mean, once Napster kind of came along, it kind of killed the record stores. It killed physical sales to some extent, and everything you put out there was just there for free, and now it's still kind of pretty much free on Spotify and YouTube.
It's right there.
If you don't want to buy the record, you don't have to, and I mean, it is what it is. So
do you have anything special coming up for the 30th anniversary?
No, I mean, I don't. It's funny. I don't really know if I want to dwell on it, or it's funny because I almost feel like it's a negative in a way. I mean,
man, I look at the stickers. I look at so many of these bands I recognize. Like I said, Purvis was one of my favorite bands. It introduced me to one of my local heroes, Eric Schmidt. Eric's probably one of the most beautiful souls you can meet.
Nice guy.
And it's just like a trip down memory lane.
Man.
How could you not be proud of that?
I mean, we might do something. It's funny because nowadays I'm talking to bands, and my current lineup of artists weren't even born when when Idol Records started. So it's kind of weird to think that the label's actually older than some of the musicians on the label now.
But it's kind of a legendary label.
I mean, I'm proud of it, and it's I mean, it's cool because there are definitely people that love the label, and I get nice emails all the time, and people come up to me and tell me how much they love it and grew up, and I was the same way with, like when I first moved to LA, I Triple X Records was like the first label I kind of worked with, and I bought like a bunch of their records, and I just went beating on their door one day on Hollywood Boulevard, and they amazingly gave me a little break and let me kind of start working part-time with them, and taught me a lot, and so I know how that feels to to grow up and be a fan of a record label, and so
Yeah,
it's
man,
cool when I get that. You know,
I like I said, you and I met briefly years ago. I know who you are. Tons of people know who you are. But I feel the same way. I think we share that love of what we do,
right?
just being around it.
Yeah.
I get excited anytime I'm in the presence of music.
Me too. Yeah.
In a venue,
right?
Or you're getting to see a band that you've loved forever.
Yeah.
You know, whether they're still successful or whether you're seeing them in a club. Like,
yeah.
I was that kid that read the liner notes.
Me too.
Wanted to know who did what.
Yeah.
You know, so
yeah, devoured music magazines and yeah, I mean, it was just everything was music and
yeah.
and you know, so it's not the most lucrative business to be in, but I mean, I do what I love, and that's more important to me. And I somehow make it work.
What do they say? Do something you love, you'll never work.
That's true. I mean, I recommend it to anybody because I know. I mean, I've had plenty of soul sucking jobs early in my life, and worked in restaurants and
it's not worth it.
Factories, and you know, I did it all. You know, before I was, you know, kind of moved to California to start my path in this, and I've been fortunate to have done it ever since. And you know, I think if you know, I know a lot of people that have great paying jobs, but they just dread going to work every day. And you know, it's hard to give that up to pursue your dream, but I recommend it.
It is. It's hard to give up a lot. You know, when I started what I do, I was working a soul sucking job. I was making shit for money, and this opportunity fell in my lap, and I was scared. I had just become a single dad, and I thought, but I rolled the dice, and I'm not saying that I'm, you know, I'm not rich by any means, but I've been around the world a few times and on someone else's dime.
Exactly. And,
I mean, I get to spend all my day just playing with guitars.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, you know, I went to Japan a couple of years ago to do a lecture for a university. You know, it was so cool. You know, and then about the music business in the United States, and I'm, you know, not a great public speaker or anything, but I was like, I can't turn that down. You know,
I appreciate you doing this.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
You told me.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I've been offered to be on a lot of podcasts, and this is the first one I've done because I'm an introvert, and
I'm very flattered. Like I said, I met you years ago when I was in Mitra, and you were kind of this ominous figure that they just talked about at rehearsal, and I was like, I don't want to meet him. I don't care if he put the album out. Right. I don't want to.
Yeah, I mean, you'll never see me on stage. Like a lot of label people are pretty outgoing, and they want to. Maybe they wish they were, you know, on stage. You know, the one, you know, they'll be up there introducing bands, or I've had showcases. I'll never be the one on stage, or you know, I like to be in the background. And although I'm a very friendly guy, but I'm definitely a shy person. So I live vicariously through my bands a little bit. You know, so.
Well, thank you so much, man, for the for taking the time.
Oh,
to do
thank
this.
you. I appreciate it.
Where can people find Last Beat online, social media?
Idle Records.
Last Beat. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Idle Records. You mentioned Last Beat.
That's a good friend of mine. But Idle Records. You can find us at idlerecords.com. Any social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Anything is all just going to be on Idle Records, IDOL Records. And
do you take artist submissions like unsolicited?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can. You can send us solicitations through any social media, or just info@idlerecords.com is email address you can send links to, and our mailing address is on the website and stuff if you want to send a CD or anything like that, or an album or anything. So yeah, we always love hearing solicitations, new music and stuff. So anybody feel free to get in touch if you've got music and you're a serious musician that wants to get out there and do something, And,
well, the podcast is called Is Breakfast Included?
Yeah.
If it was, or what would you have?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's I'm a big fan of eggs and hash browns, either scrambled eggs or maybe over easy. Yeah. That'd be my favorite breakfast. And although I also like oatmeal quite a bit too, so I'm a regular oatmeal fan.
All right, man.
And that would be it. Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, thanks for your time, man.
Oh, thank you so much, Bernie. I appreciate it.
All right.
All right.
Right on. Erv Karwelis. You can find Idol Records at Idol Records on Instagram. Go check it out. Check out the artists on there. Support independent music. Buy their records, guys. Like I said, Harry Styles don't need your money. I mean, you can buy his record too, but also buy a couple of Idol Records artists too. Their records. Anyway, I am done. I hope you have a great day. We'll talk to you next week.